Okay, Unstoppables, I am back. I am live. Of course, I was set up to be that way round, and now I'm this way round. I might even have to rejuggle my seating arrangements. Oh my God. Swear to God, if I was anywhere near professional, I'd be bloody dangerous. Ah! I think we have liftoff. I think we do. I'm going to have to hold you. Hold me now. That's good. That means I can put it in. We are live. Oh my God.
Sorry. Yes, I still have a
sorry.
BlackBerry.
You know, this is me learning my lesson. This is what happens when you get complacent and a bit smug and a bit like, oh, it's fine. We'll just do it. It's worked every other time. Anyhow, let's do some quick introductions and let's see who's watching us live. So, hello everyone. My name is Heidi Mavir. I'm the Unstoppable Woman. You're on my page, The Unstoppable Woman. Who knew? And this is part of my weekly Unstoppable series. It's a weekly interview with someone who I find inspiring, incredible, inspirational, someone who I love very much in this case. Every week I interview someone who has a story to tell or wisdom to share. So this week I'm joined by Nanny Kimbo, known as the Queer Doula. Hey, and we're going to chat all things kind of trans, birth spaces, all that jazz. Living on a boat, that'll probably come up. Which is part of the reason why we couldn't test the tech, because she was just because they were just like, I'm just moving the boat, and I just have to pull myself up. So just to make you aware, if you are referring to Nanny Kimbo, their pronouns are them and they, and even I slip up sometimes, but that's what we're going with. And if I slip up, I will apologise and we'll move along. We'll pretend it never happened. Okay, how are you?
It's been a week. It has been a week, honestly.
I know when you were messaging me earlier on, I was like, poor Kimbo, she's not having the best of days. God love you. Because we should explain a little that you live on a boat, which is awesome, and all very rosy and Jim. But you have to move your boat every 2 weeks, is that right?
I do have to move every 2 weeks. Yeah. I don't know about it being rosy and Jim. I would vehemently disagree. It's a nightmare, frankly. I have a leaky boat, which is something you really don't want when you have a boat.
Hashtag not a euphemism.
It's stressful. If things were working as they should, it would be fine. But because nothing works, it's pretty shitty.
Yeah. So that's why we were a little late getting started tonight, and also I was a little disorganized. But hey, we're embracing our imperfections. We're all about that. Yeah. So I can see Louise is watching. Lou, would you do me a favor, like you do every week? Would you post this in the Unstoppable Woman Inspiration Station for me? I'd love you forever if you do. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's just do a quick dive in and tell me a little bit about yourself, because everyone watching might not know you. Give me your, I was going to say elevator pitch, but neither you or I are down with the elevator pitch thing, because it's not really our world. But tell people a little bit about you.
So I'm Kim, also known as Nanny Kimbo. You're coming through my Nanny Kimbo page if you're watching if you're one of my fans. Hello, hi. I am the Queer Doula. I trained to be a doula last year in June. I initially trained with Doula UK, and I immediately realised that there was a huge gap in the market for queer birth workers. And I decided, frankly, I wanted to plug that gap. I need to be in that sort of space as a queer person. I can provide a service for queer people. I have known I've been queer for pretty much my whole life, I have to say. I've kind of explored things, and I guess you could say it's changed, because I've gone from being sort of lesbian to this to that to something, and now I basically define myself as queer, and I am trans non-binary. I came out as being trans last year, so it's almost a year ago actually. Last year on coming out day, I decided, there we go. And it's been a heck of a ride since, I have to say.
Do you know, just on a personal level, the change in you since you came out, I can see how much, how better your mental health has been more than anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've talked about that before, haven't we, you and I, about
Yeah.
when you're a trans person or when you're a queer person, it's really bad for your mental health to try to not be.
It
Um,
really is. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm glad that you're where you are. Like it's been, we've been friends for a while and it's been
We
lovely.
have,
I
yeah.
know it's been challenging and I know it's not been a
It
total
has.
walk in the park, but
Yeah.
I just feel like you've really come into your own in the past year. That's not meant to be patronizing, by the way, but anyway, that's my observation. So,
Yeah, I
I'm gonna
mean, you're
go on.
absolutely right. Um, I was basically trying to
Oh, oh
through.
no! Oh, that's all right. We've got you. I lost
Are we
you. Keep
okay?
going. Yeah, we're
Okay.
there.
Um, tech. Are we okay? Yeah. Are we okay?
It's very
Are we
droppy in and
still?
outy at my end. Yeah, it's very droppy in and outy at my end, but I don't know if it's droppy in and outy at your end. Is it droppy in and outy at your end?
Um, it seems to be okay, but I think if people are messaging me, maybe that's interrupting it. Don't send messages, please.
Everybody in the whole of the UK, turn your internet off.
Yes, please. And
We
don't
need a
don't message
clear
me.
line. Yeah, okay. So I could,
Um,
go on, go ahead.
yeah, so it was quite a sort of a journey getting to the point where I was like, okay, so I'm trans, and I sort of it like over a year up until I officially came out, I suppose. I was trying to figure things out, and I was like, I was born female, but I don't want to be male, so what does that mean? And then sort of when I finally came out as being trans, and I was like, so hey, I'm trans, and everyone was like, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
So it felt like I was the last person to know, actually. Um, it was kind of
Like,
like, yeah,
I'm
we,
queer. No shit, Sherlock.
yeah, and it was just like people were just like, oh, thank God for that. They finally got
But you
there.
can't force it. But
Um,
you can't force it on people, can you? And like for someone's
no,
own identity, it has to be. They have to come to that themselves. You often hear that about when
yeah,
people come out as gay, that everyone around them goes,
yeah,
"Well, yeah," But it's yours to own, and it's your journey, and you've got to work out where and how you define yourself and how that feels.
yeah. And I
Defo.
think as well, being non-binary, that's kind of an added layer of difficulty because a lot of people just don't accept that as a thing. They're like, yeah, that's not even a thing. When it
Yeah,
clearly is because here I am.
you exist.
But they're just like, yeah, you need to decide what you are, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm non-binary. That's what I am. Um,
So for people who
and it
don't know, go on, go ahead. Sorry, go on.
yeah, I was going to say it's been a hard road, but I'm here and I'm queer and that's it. I'm just, yeah.
Amazing. So for people who don't know, people who don't move in the right circles, or maybe just have never come across someone who identifies as non-binary before, or who is non-binary, not just identifies as, would you mind explaining what that means for you?
So for me, I when I was younger, I was always sort of convinced that I wasn't a girl. Um,
Hmm.
but I knew that I wasn't a boy. Um, and that kind of it sounds really complex, and it was when I was younger because I didn't understand it because I knew I wasn't a girl, but I didn't want to be a boy, and I wasn't a boy. And I guess the way sort of society is now, we're kind of we're at a sort of crux at the moment of either the whole trans thing is going to be fine and everyone's just going to be like, oh, I don't know what the fuss was about, or we're going to be completely shoved in the opposite direction and it's going to be criminalized and all of that rubbish again. Let's hope for the former. But essentially, for
Hmm.
me, non-binary, I was assigned female at birth. for those who are wondering, I have a vagina. No, I
People
don't
always want
want
to
a
know that
penis.
answer, don't they? So, what's in your
Yeah,
pants? Like, mind your own bloody
it's
business. But
honestly, it's the most common question asked, what my
mm,
genitals are. I don't want a penis. No, thank you. I don't want that responsibility. Um, I would, I wouldn't mind not having breasts. My breasts are the thing that caused me the most amount of issues.
mm,
But at the moment, I can't really afford it, and I'm not really in a rush to go and have some major surgery.
mm,
Um, and so I guess for me, it's just, I'm just a person. I'm not feminine. I've never been feminine. As when we were discussing previously, when I was wearing dresses, it was just like, it was really hyper feminine. It was over the top. It was, here's my tits, look at my tits, look at my
it was like
dress,
you
my
went through
makeup.
about. I remember when we were friends at that time. You went through a period of about 4 or 5 months when it was like Jessica Rabbit is in the building. It was
Yeah,
like your
basically
breasts would
it was.
arrive like 5 minutes before the rest of your body.
Yeah, yeah, and it was, I tried it, and I was like, no, this isn't right. This is not me.
Mm,
So it's not like I've just suddenly decided on a whim, oh, by the way, this is me because it's trendy. um
mm,
and I guess the way I've kind of described it in the past is, all my life I've been told that I'm a size 4 shoe. And so all my life I've worn a size 4 shoe because that's what I'm told, but it's never felt comfortable wearing a size 4. But everyone's insisted, of course you're a size 4. We know you're a size 4. Look at you. You have to be a size 4. And they're like, maybe you just haven't found the right kind of size 4. And then just one day I'm in a shoe shop asking for a size 4 and trying to cram my foot in. And they say at the shoe shop, maybe you're a size 5. And I've just sort of got to the point where I'm like, well, I mean, everyone's told me I'm a size 4. I look like I'm a size 4. I have all of the traits of a size 4 shoe. And they were like, well, let's just try a size 5 anyway. And suddenly I try a size 5 on and it fits perfectly. Um, and yeah, I
you're like
guess
the
that's kind of
Cinderella of non-binary.
pretty much, yeah, something like that. It's weird. But, once I realized that I was a size 5, just I let go of all of my size 4 shoes, and that was it. So yeah,
Mm,
it's been a challenge, but it's been great. And getting to this point where I am now, where I just feel so much freer.
mm,
I'm not completely free from problems. I have had my fair share of transphobia, especially in recent months.
mm,
Um, but now I can deal with that because now I just don't give a shit. So yeah, that's where I am at
yeah,
the minute.
amazing. I love you as a size 5. I can see how much happier you are as a size 5. Um,
Yeah.
so just take a step back then. So
Mhm.
when we first met, you were working as
Yeah.
a nanny, and you still do work as a
Mhm.
nanny, right? That's kind of like
Yeah.
your main bread and butter stuff. And then you
Yeah.
trained as a doula. So
Mhm.
explain to people what a doula does and what a doula is. Louise is saying that she had a birthing doula and she was wonderful and absolutely vital in her birth experience, and she wished that everyone would be given the opportunity to have one. It's a great thing that you do.
Yeah.
So explain what a
Yeah.
doula does, because some people might not know.
So the great and wonderful Mars Lord, who I trained with this year, says that a doula doesn't do. A doula will just be. Um, and essentially, so there are different kinds of doulas. You can have a birth doula, a postnatal doula. I'm currently training as a pregnancy and infant loss doula as well. And you can have a death doula, and there's a whole host of basically doula services. And so for me, my main interest is postnatal, because a very dear friend of mine had really severe postnatal depression, and she just didn't know where to turn. Um, she didn't want someone to fix her. She just wanted someone to point her in the right direction, to show her that actually she's not the only person that's going through this, and there is a way through it. So she was the person who inspired me to sort of to take this path. And essentially, a doula is somebody who's holding your hand They're guiding you through pregnancy, labour, postnatal period. And if you decide to not continue your pregnancy for whatever reason, they're there to hold your hand and support you. We don't do things for you. We sort of empower you to do things for yourself. As a postnatal doula, we can provide services such as batch cooking, so cooking meals and freezing them for you. We can do things such as just hold the baby so you can go and take a shower, walk the dog so you don't have to worry about that. Do a couple of loads of laundry, because that's something that really stresses out new parents when there's lots of laundry going on. It's essentially just to hold your hand and make things easier for you, because we live in a society now where as soon as somebody's had a baby, people are like, oh, so when are you going back to work? When are you doing this? When are you doing that? And oh, do you not think maybe you might need to lose the baby belly now? And it's like, well, actually, traditionally, there was a fourth trimester where people had what's known as a lying in period, where they would spend 40 days in bed with their baby, doing all of the things that you want to do with a new baby, just getting to know them, sniffing their heads, just taking in all of those moments.
Baby's head smells so good. Sorry.
It's perfect, isn't it? Just that smell. And yeah, so as a doula, we're just there to hold your hand and just point you in the right direction for various things. So if you're working as a birth doula, you will have antenatal classes. If that's something your doula provides, they will help you maybe work through your birth plan. They're not going to do it for you, but they're going to make you more aware that you have options to do things differently. I spoke to a client recently and I said, so when you get to that point, so she doesn't want me as a birth doula, which is, that's her choice. She wants me postnatally. And I said, do you have a birth plan? And how are you going to do it? And she said, well, we'll just see what the doctor says. And I was like, no. And I have another friend.
Challenging. That must be quite difficult, because you want to do what you want to do your best for your clients, and also it must be. I don't think I would be a very good doula, because I don't think I would be very good at letting people do their own thing. I think I'd be an excellent midwife, because I'd be like, do this, lift this leg, push now. I'd be perfect in midwifery, but I don't think I'd be a great doula. I think I'd be a bit too. It takes a particular kind of. I've got a question for you from a viewer actually, but I'll go to that in a second. It takes a particular kind of personality to hold space for someone in that moment, especially when you it's where you've been trained and you kind of know how it usually goes, and that must be quite challenging.
And it's exactly that, as you say. It's about holding space for people, and essentially letting them figure it out on their own without them thinking that they're alone, because I think that's what people go through now. It's just like everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got an idea, but nobody's like, hey, okay, let's I want to listen to you talk about things. And I can show you some resources and you can make these decisions for yourself.
And I think go on, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think just we need to just take a few steps back with birth and the perinatal period.
So my daughter, she's 15 tomorrow, so this day 15 years ago I was just starting labor. And it's always a funny day when it's the anniversary of your child being born. Anyway, we had a home birth, a water birth at home. I didn't have a doula. I was very fortunate. The local council that I was under, it's 15 years ago, they were pretty progressive, and I had 2 NHS midwives assist me at home, and they were both great. I don't remember what one of them looked like. She was down the business end, but the other one was amazing. And I remember they left straight after Tilly. So Tilly was born at 6:15. They'd left by 8 o'clock, and we were there with this brand new baby, because everything had gone really
Yeah.
well. I didn't have any tears. It was all great. You know, we'd ordered chicken nuggets from the takeaway. It was all good. And then
Yeah.
the sign of a good evening. And then they left, and we were sat like literally holding the baby. And I was sitting on the
Yeah.
on the chair next to my then husband, my soon to be
Mm-hmm.
ex-husband at the time. But anyway, and I remember saying to him, "Shit, do we put a nappy on her?" And him being like, "Oh, I'm not sure." And I think we were both in shock. And he rang the local midwifery unit to ask them if we should put a
Yeah.
nappy on her, because
Yeah.
we just didn't have a clue. Like, we were just both
Yeah.
in shock. And like, that's when I would have liked to have had a doula there, so that they
Yeah.
could have said, that might be a good idea. Would you like some help with knowing how to do that? You know, rather than me
Yeah.
going, we've just had a baby and we're not sure whether to put a nappy on it or not. And then being like, yes.
Yeah.
like these nutty home birthers, you know.
Well,
But you
I
know,
mean, yeah.
but I think that is what a doula, for me, that's how a doula might have been helpful to me in that period immediately
Yeah.
after she was born, and
Yeah.
when everyone left, and my husband went back to work, and I was like,
Yeah.
shit, what do I do now? Like,
Yeah.
you're responsible for keeping a brand new person alive. And I was
Yeah.
like, God, I can just about remember to hold her, which way up to hold her, and that's about as far as my expertise goes, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it would have been good to have a doula. I wish I had had one.
Yeah.
So go ahead, go on. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's where postnatal depression kicks in, because, you know, you're in your little bubble for a while, and, you know, husbands at home, partners at home, wives at home, whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, mother-in-law comes to visit, your mum comes to visit, everyone wants to come and see the baby, and everybody wants to hug the baby, touch the baby, kiss the baby. Nobody wants
Tell
to
you how
help the
clever you
mum.
are. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, and nobody, you know, everyone wants to hold the baby, but nobody wants to hold the mum, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, whoever it is who's given birth. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's like, well, you know, what about me? You know,
Mm.
I need, you know, I need people to say, yay, you're amazing, look at what you did, you just birthed this whole human being. And
And
it's,
also,
you know,
like, would you like to go and have a pee?
yeah,
Or
exactly.
would you feel nice if you went and had a shower, maybe, you know, on your
Yeah.
own? You know, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, which when you've got a brand new baby is quite tricky. Um,
Yeah.
so so obviously you do that, and you do that for queer parents. So this links in nicely to the question from Anna, and maybe you can talk about this and then answer Anna's question. So Anna is a birth worker in New Zealand, Anna Driver, and she says that
Yep.
she's a big fan of yours. And she wants to know, she's a birth doula, hypnobirthing teacher, antenatal educator, and she'd love to know from you tips on how she can be, sorry, I'm assuming you're a she, Anna, how they can be more inclusive to queer and trans parents as a birth worker. So obviously that's what you do. So do you want to talk a little about
Yeah.
that, about how that's different?
Okay. So, as a queer person, I provide a queer-led service. So my service is by queers for queers. That's not to say that I wouldn't work with straight parents, because as a nanny, I did that for 11 years. And I'm not about to say, sorry, no straight people, because, you know, that's discrimination and we don't do that over here.
And
Um,
also, your very favourite person in the whole world happens to be a straight person.
I mean, questionably, but yeah. Yeah,
Don't
so
you be outing
straightish.
me. But yeah, go on.
But yeah, so are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Just
Okay.
having a moment.
So the reason the reason I sort of want to specialize with queer parents is because being queer isn't something you can teach. It's something you
Mm,
are, or you either are or you're not. You
mm,
can learn, you know, you can learn all of the correct terminology. You can learn how to be careful and mindful. You can learn about pronouns and all of those different bits and pieces, and how various queer relationships might work, but you don't feel it. You'll never be able to feel it
mm,
if you're not queer. So for me, I never assume a person's pronouns, because I know that not everybody has she, him pronouns, or he, she. Yeah, that's it. I don't even know what the straight pronouns are. He, she.
You're so queer, you don't even know how to label straight people.
Well, I mean, what can I say? Everybody's a little bit queer, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so for heterosexual people, I think probably the most important thing is to show queer people that you're there for them. And I don't just mean saying, hey, we can serve you as a queer person. It's more about understanding, researching, and just knowing the barriers that queer people face. So fertility, so right from the very beginning, conception, there's always, how do we go about this? And it's good to be able to know that there are many, many ways to conceive a baby, as there are for straight couples. And just knowing the different challenges that queer people face. They can't, there's so many barriers. I mean, if I started listing them, we'd be here all night. But there just are so many barriers, and a lot of people won't serve queer people because of religious reasons, and that's fair enough. I understand that, but I feel personally like if your religion stops you serving certain people, perhaps you shouldn't work in those fields, where you might come
Or get
across
a new
those
god.
people. Well, yeah, that too. So
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to effectively be inclusive, just know your shit. Do your research. Look at your queer people, your queer peers. Follow them, platform them, listen to the things that they're saying, and just ask questions. Don't ask sort of things like, who has the penis and who has the vagina. Things like that are really inappropriate, and also they're not necessary for you to know. But just, know that they're bigger than the binary. And things don't work the way you expect them to all the time.
Yeah. Do you know what I think? It's kind of, it's not comparable, but I suppose for me as a lived experience, it rings some similar bells. So, as you know, I have a daughter who's neurodivergent. She has autism. And I have conversations with people about autism a lot for that reason.
Yeah.
And no amount of explaining to people what having an autistic child is like, or specifically what having my autistic child is like, because every autistic child is different, every autistic person is different, will give them that lived experience. Whereas I'm in some communities with other parents of autistic children, and we just start from a different place. We don't have to have all of that conversation before we can talk about what's happening. I don't have to do that whole, like, not all autistic people are like Rain Man kind of conversation that I have to do with people who maybe don't have experience of dealing with autistics. And I think, is that a parallel? Is that comparable, do you think? That kind of like that shared terms of reference thing for queer people? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. When you've met one queer person, you've met one queer person. We're not all the same.
Yeah.
A lot of LGBTQI plus people don't feel comfortable with the word queer. And so if, I wouldn't go straight in and say, so queer people, because I know that some people don't feel comfortable with that. Transgender, for example, some people, like some older trans people, use transsexual, but a lot of younger trans people don't like that. We just use trans. It doesn't matter, transgender, transsexual, we don't, it's just trans, or trans with a little asterisk after it. But yeah, I mean, we're all completely different. We're all sort of, that there is no standard queer person, standard trans person, standard lesbian. We're all just completely different. And so the best way to get started is to just ask. Never assume. That's pretty much it. Don't assume.
That's the biggie, isn't it? I think when we spoke last time, we talked a bit about that, how it's kind of like you have to recognize your own ignorance, and I've had to do this, and you have to kind of like kind of recognize that the person on the other end of the conversation is having to be quite patient with you sometimes. And like, I know
Yeah.
you and I have this relationship where we can message each other and I'll be like, I've just seen this. Am I right to think this? And you'll be like, yeah. And you'll be
Yeah.
like, I've just seen this. Am I right to think this? And I'll be like, yeah, but you need
Yeah.
kind of like, I should imagine that if you're working with someone who's queer or trans or gay or who isn't who isn't straight,
Yeah.
and you are, there needs to
Hmm.
be that level of recognizing that their lived experience will be different to yours, and you're going to have to ask questions, and they're going to have to be okay with you answering them, with you asking them and them answering them. So there's an extra barrier to you working with them, possibly. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, even as a queer person, there is still a barrier, but less so, because
Mm.
straight people in general, they might not be as familiar with queer terminology. They might sort of be surprised if I were to say, oh yes, I'm queer. In fact, actually, yesterday I was talking to somebody about that, and she was like, "Wow, are we allowed to say that now?" And I was like, "You're not. I am." Because I am queer.
Yeah.
If I say, I am the Queer Doula and that's my business name, so that's fine if you say the Queer Doula, but you can't say, yeah, I know Kimbo. Kimbo's a queer, because that's really offensive. You don't do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of having to recognize your privilege. And I know that's something I talk about all the time, in not just as a queer
Hmm.
person, but as a white person. I'm always like, yep, check your privilege. Um,
Hmm.
and when I talk to men like Andy, poor Andy, the practically straight white man, I'm always like, dude, check your privilege. Just
Andy's your partner.
Andy is my partner, yes.
For people who
He's
don't
not
know,
here at
Andy's
the
your partner.
moment.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but bless him, I've been beating him with my feminist stick for 4 years, and he's a really good feminist these days. Um, he pulls the
He's
blokes up
very
at
well
work.
trained.
Yeah, no, I have. He knows that through being in a relationship with me, he knows that gender isn't. Didn't know. That's why when I was 4 or 5, I was like, I'm not a
Mm.
girl, but I'm not a boy. I'm just Kim. And as I got older, when I started exploring my sexuality, I was a lesbian for a while, and then I was
Mm.
bisexual, and then I was pansexual, and people were like, well, which are you? And I'm like, well, actually, I don't know yet, because I haven't figured it out. And it's just, being immersed in sort of queer everything. It's like, okay, so this is actually what I am. And it's, you've just got to learn, and if you don't know, you don't know. And that goes for queer people and straight people.
Yeah.
um and
Yeah.
just tune in
And you've
every
got to
now
be
and
willing to
again,
ask.
listen. Yes. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Willing to ask and
one of
not
the
assume. And
yeah, yeah, I think one of the things people are really afraid of asking, because they're really afraid of offending. um We've got to the
mm,
point in society now where, oh, being offended is, it's a bad thing. Well, I mean, not everybody's offended by everything, and this whole snowflake thing, I'm not going to get on my soapbox about it, but you know where I stand. Asking me
yeah.
what's in my trousers is offensive. Asking me my pronouns is not offensive. There's a difference. If you need to
Mm.
know what's in my trousers, then it's not offensive to ask me what's in my trousers. But frankly, almost nobody needs to know what's in.
No, absolutely. And when they do, and when they, ah, we are. Go ahead. when you're considering a question that you want to ask, just ask it. Is that what you said? Ah, we've got a droppy in and outy connection. Oh no. Ah, yeah, I think we're caught up now. So I think you were saying, yeah, give it some consideration. And maybe even like there are ways to frame it, aren't there? I think we are. I'm sure that when we watch this back, we'll be like, oh, and then you said this, and then I said this. Um, so do you mind talking a little about, because when we spoke last time, we spoke a bit about the opposite of inclusivity when we spoke, just you and I, which I think is really important. The stuff around language, particularly around pregnancy and birth, and how alienating that can be for LGBTQI plus people. And do you want to talk a little about that? Because I'd never considered it. And then we watched that program Seahorse that you recommended to me, and I watched it with my daughter, and she's like, as woke as, and she was like, this is ridiculous, why don't they just change all the paperwork so it just says parent fixed? And I was like, well, yeah, that would fix it, but it would be a start. But do you want to talk a little about that, because I hadn't even considered that before?
So essentially, pregnancy, birth, the perinatal period, it's all about mum giving birth, mum being pregnant, mum, doing all of this, and then dad is the person who got mum pregnant, and it's all very cisgender, heterosexual, and normal, as they say. But I think even sort of queer people aside, there are some people culturally who don't use mum and dad anyway. And so it's not just excluding queer people, it's excluding a whole bunch of other people who are not from the same culture that we're in. Because, some people just don't use those terms. And I think if we just dial it back and just really look at, sort of think about things, I think, sorry, my thoughts are just racing at the moment because this is something I talk about quite a lot.
I know.
So one of the things that I come up against a lot as a trans person is the accusation that I'm trying to erase women. Now, that's just absurd. Like, most of my favorite people are women. And exactly, and if I were to erase women, I'd have pretty much nobody. I'd only have Andy.
Yeah.
And it would be a pretty lonely life. Nobody wants to erase women. What we want is women, and we want to include other people. And so if we just have parents on the form, we have parent, gestational parent, birthing parent, however you want to define it. Parent giving birth is X, parent supporting is Y. It may just be that there's a single parent by choice or not by choice. And so when you talk about mum and dad, that can also be isolating for a single mother or a single father. For example, in Seahorse, as you will have noticed, Freddie is a single father and single father by choice. And that's entirely isolating for him because he had to, and it's something I've talked about quite a lot, that moment where he goes through the form, just striking out mother, maternity, it's really gut-wrenching because it's almost like that's proving to transphobic people that we're just getting rid of women, mother, but we're not. It's just that Freddie isn't the mother. And so for him, having that on the form, it's triggering, it's damaging. And it's also incorrect.
Parent, and the word parent works for women too. Like, I'm a woman and I'm a parent, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And like at home, Tilly calls me mum, that's also fine. But I'm not. I think it's funny. Professionals do this. When you're seeing people with your child and you go to the doctor or you speak to people in school, and they'll refer to you in the third person as mum. So they'll say, so
Yeah.
mum has told me this, and mum has told me. You know, when you're like, I've got a name. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
know my name. Why are you
Yeah.
doing that? It's a weird thing. It's like we have this thing culturally about,
Yeah.
there's like this status of mother, and I get it. I think we talked
Mhm.
about it. Like there's almost like a cult of mother. Like it's
Yeah.
like if you're a woman and you haven't given birth, you're not a full woman.
Yeah.
And if you were pregnant and you didn't have a vaginal delivery, it wasn't a proper birth. And it's like,
Yeah.
fuck off. You know, like, and I say that
Yeah.
as a woman who has given birth and who had a
Yeah.
vaginal delivery. You know, it's just it's rubbish, and it's
Yeah.
damaging to everybody, not just
Yeah.
to, you know, it's so unhealthy. So I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of work to do there, and I can see how
Yeah.
that extra layer of even more alienation, because
Mhm.
your defining characteristic is not even on the forms. You know, there's
Yeah.
just no room for you on those forms because
Yeah.
you're not a woman and you're not the mother. You know, for
Yeah.
example. Yeah,
And and people will argue, well, if you gave birth then, and to that I just say fuck off. I'm not even going to get into it because you're a fucking idiot, and frankly, men do give birth. I've seen it. I've literally seen men give birth. And but the thing is, if we just level the playing field, it helps everybody.
yeah,
It doesn't just help the queer people, the trans people, it helps everybody because it
yeah,
makes everybody feel included. And that includes mothers who don't identify as such.
yeah,
Or women, for example, who don't identify as mothers. And
yeah.
that's okay. And I think, you know, we're too rigid, and we like to pigeonhole people, and we like to say, this is your box, you're a woman, you gave birth, therefore you're a mother, you're mummy, you're this, you're that. And some people are like, well, actually, no, that's not how it
Mm,
is. I gave birth, but I'm Bubba, or I'm Heidi, because my child calls me Heidi because that's just it, that's my name, that's who I am, and that's
yeah,
fine. But by having that whole culture of you gave birth, you are mother, and as you say, referring to you in the third person as mum, it's fucking weird. Like,
I hate it.
why do you do
I
that?
hate it.
It's like that strips away everything else that you are, and to them all you are is mother, and that's
Yeah.
fucking weird.
I mean, it's a conversation for another time, but there's a whole raft of
Yeah.
stuff around women in business that does my tree, and stuff
Yeah.
like mumpreneur. Can't stand it. Makes me want to chew my own face off. It's
Yeah.
just, oh, yeah, anyway. So, what I
Yeah.
found really interesting about, and if people haven't seen the film Seahorse, it's a brilliant piece of television, and it's on BBC iPlayer currently. Is it still available on iPlayer? Do you know? I know it was for a while. I don't know how long it stays on
I
for.
think it might have a couple of days left.
Yeah, it's a great film.
But it is touring in cinemas, and if you haven't seen it, and if it's not in your area, you can actually contact Freddie and request for the rights for it to be played at your cinema. I'm not entirely sure how it all works out, but I know that Freddie is allowing people to request it to show in their
All
town.
right,
um,
amazing.
and I will have a look at it.
Oh, I might have lost you. I haven't. You're still
I'm still here.
there. So the thing I thought was really interesting, like you said about I've seen men give birth, the thing I
Yeah.
thought was really interesting in that film was you did see Freddie giving birth. I mean, you didn't,
Yeah.
it wasn't gratuitous. There were, you know, and never in that process, whilst watching it, did I not think there's a man giving birth. You know, it was really, like you say, it was the best piece of TV in terms of just being able to say to people, there you go, men give birth. And there you go,
Yeah.
there's it happening. It was great. It was
Yeah.
brilliant. Just awesome. But I also
Yeah.
thought that it was just so beautifully handled. And there was a bit in it where Freddie was had gone to, I think, his mum's house, and some of his mum's friends were there, and they were chatting. And
Yeah.
there was this bit in it where they were all talking about being parents, about being mums, and
Mhm.
the way that it was filmed was just, you could just see how isolating just that conversation was. And that was in a room of people who loved him, you know, and who wanted the best for him. And it really gave me oh, I get it now kind of moment. I like that, as near as I could get to understanding what that might have felt like. It was a really human moment. And I just thought, and I just remember thinking, oh, we can all relate to that, being in a room full of people and feeling completely alone, which is how it played out in the film. I'm kind of assuming his emotional response by how it was shown on film. But I kind of thought, shit, on top of being pregnant and all that does to you physically and mentally and emotionally, you've got that extra layer of that. Geez, because when I was pregnant, oh my God, I was all over the place. You know, like I just, it messes with you. You know,
it does,
I can imagine it must be doubly difficult. So what do you want people to know? What kind of, if you were, as a person, you know, as the queer doula, what are the things that you really want people to know and understand about your work, or about the birthing space, or about being queer? What are the things that you kind of like are your top? You know, if you could be like, wave magic wand right now, and like people like, ta-da, everyone gets it. What would that be?
I think one of the big things that people don't seem to realize is that the birth industry, and frankly that it is an industry, it's still very homophobic, and it's still almost entirely transphobic. It just is. And I think if people see in their own selves that actually they might be transphobic and they might be homophobic, and just sit with that and then work through it, that would be so helpful. It's being homophobic or transphobic doesn't make you a bad person. People have been socially conditioned into believing things have to be a certain way, and it takes a lot of introspection. I was transphobic. I was massively transphobic before I realized that I was trans, and my transphobia was mostly directed at myself. I was like, of course I'm not transphobic, not trans. Like, what are you talking about? How can I possibly be trans? And that was my own internalized transphobia, because I just didn't want to accept that about myself. Because in that moment, the worst thing that I could possibly be was transgender. And that was because of the social conditioning that I've had. And that's okay, you know, you're not a bad person because you have these thoughts. It's the way society has conditioned you. Just reach out. And, you know, I think to understand first and foremost that queer people, trans people have to do this on a daily basis. And if you want to reach out and talk to a queer person or a trans person, offer them something in exchange. Don't just expect free education. And I think also just accept that things are not quite how you think they are. I think that's one of the biggest things as well, is accepting. If somebody says, I'm a pregnant man, don't be like, well, you're pregnant, so you're clearly a woman, because I mean, that's just shitty behavior. That's not, you know, nothing. Exactly. Don't be a dick. Nothing is black and white. And if you're unsure, just ask. That's probably the biggest takeaway. If you're unsure, just ask. And most of us don't mind asking. In fact, we prefer to be asked, because we don't like people assuming, because that then makes us uncomfortable. And then we have to have the awkward conversation after someone said she for the 954th time. I then have to go, oh, actually, it's they. Or I just ignore it and basically sit there and die a little bit inside every time somebody calls me she repeatedly, and then just go away and be like, okay, I need to get on my soapbox again.
Do you mind just addressing that? Because we've spoken about this before, you and I. When someone accidentally misgenders you, and I've done this, I think I did it on the beginning of the call. What would you prefer? How would you prefer for them to deal with that? and I know it's personal preference, but what's your personal preference for when someone calls you she accidentally? How would you
Yeah.
like them to deal with that?
It mostly depends on the situation. Usually just acknowledge your mistake, fix it and move on.
Mm.
I think if you start dwelling on it and just being like, oh my God, I'm really trying and I'm really sorry and I'm this and I'm that, it then makes it about you and it's not about you. And I think, don't have a pity party. Go home and have a pity party on your own later and just be like, oh, for fuck's sake, I did it again. But don't,
Hmm.
because that then it takes everything away from me.
It
And then
centers
I'm
you.
comforting
Yeah.
you then. Yeah. And that's not how it should be.
Yeah.
So, if you don't notice your mistake and somebody says, actually, don't be like, oh, well, I am trying. Can't you see I'm trying? Because again, that centers you. And again, it's not about you. So
Just
generally
say,
just acknowledge,
shit, I'm sorry. And then
yeah,
try and get it
and
better,
then
try and get it
correct yourself
right.
and move on.
Yeah.
We know when people are trying. We do know. And it's
Mm.
hard. It is hard to undo that conditioning and actually realize that people with breasts and a vagina are not necessarily women. And we've had so many years of social conditioning, and that's a lot to undo, but thankfully, because of the neuroplasticity of our brains, it is possible. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you can do, if you're, for example, if you're working with queer or trans parents, um ask their pronouns in sort of the initial consultation before you meet them. Ask their pronouns, but also ask your straight couples
Ask
what their
everybody.
pronouns are. Yeah. And then sort of, so if somebody says my pronouns are they them, just practice to yourself. Just sit at home and just say, I'm going to see Kim today. I hope they're having a good day. I hope they are happy to see me. I'm really looking forward to seeing them, and just practice, practice, practice. And then
Yeah.
sort of, when you're on your way to see me, for example, just in your head, you don't have to say it out loud. You might look a bit crazy if you're having a one-way conversation on the train, but just keep going through it in your head. Just they, them, or
Do you know
he,
what I
she, or
do you know what I think? I wish more people, and I kind of, I try and do it, and I want to do it more, and I have to
yeah,
remind myself, if we just all asked everybody what their pronouns were,
yeah,
just the first time you meet someone, oh, nice to meet
yeah,
you, whatever your name is, and what's your pronoun? Then it would just
yeah,
become normal, and it would just be a
yeah,
thing that we did,
yeah,
and it would be no biggie, you know?
yeah,
But we don't ask people who are, straight presenting or male presenting or female presenting what their pronoun is. We assume.
yeah,
And there are
yeah,
plenty of people who are male presenting who don't use he or him, and there are plenty of people who are
yeah.
female presenting who don't use she or her. Um,
Yeah, I
so
think,
I think that
yeah,
would be a
that's,
really good practice to get into.
yeah. I mean, so a lot of friends and allies have their pronouns on their social media. So, they'll have their name and then pronouns in brackets afterwards, she, her, he, him, they, them. In fact, one of my current employer, we were talking about my pronouns, and then her husband said, oh yeah, I have my pronouns in my email signature. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. And he
That's
is a man.
awesome.
He identifies as he, him, and he just has his pronouns, and that then provides a safe space for a trans person. They then know that you're safe.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
if you say, my name is Heidi, my pronouns are she, her, that then gives me the space to say, my name's Kim, my pronouns are they, them. And it just makes
Easy.
it safe. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is so easy. Yeah. And people say, oh, I can't remember all the pronouns, and there's this and there's that, and it's like, well, how many names do you remember? How many people's names? And I know that even sometimes names are difficult, and so if you're not sure, just say, sorry, what are your pronouns again? And it's that easy. Because
And
if
also,
you
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, because if you ask, we know that you care.
And also be aware that sometimes that changes for people. So I've
Yeah.
got a friend who recently has started using a different pronoun.
Mhm.
Um, and very recently. Um,
Yeah.
and they've said, you know, my pronoun is they, them. And up
Yeah.
until last time I checked, and I did check what their
Mm-hmm.
pronouns were, they were using she, her. But
Mm-hmm.
like, if it was just like that happens, and just like you say, if straight heterosexual cisgendered people just went, my pronouns are, it would just be one of those things like asking someone what their name is. It would just be simple.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
that's a really good way that allies can do something practical. And like the
Yeah.
more people that do that, the less those of us who do that will get accused of being a snowflake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully. Do you know
Well,
what? We are, yeah, maybe. That's maybe wishful thinking. We are coming towards the end of our time, but I also, just before we go,
yeah.
I want to share something that we spoke about last time about language,
Mm-hmm.
and I also just want to make sure that to see if there's anything else you want to cover. So have a think about that. But a couple of things
Mm-hmm.
about language that I've kind of checked myself on recently that we discussed when we were off this call earlier on was the thing about when you're talking about people in the third person around menstruation, which I do quite
Mm-hmm.
a bit because a lot of the people that I work with are people with wombs.
Yeah.
And I talk about menstruation. I'm a massive oversharer, as you know. So
Yeah.
that's the way that I've adjusted my language. I now don't say women. I identify myself as the unstoppable woman. That's my brand. But the people
Mm-hmm.
who I work with are my unstoppables.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to people about menstruation, to people who menstruate, I will say people with wombs or people who menstruate rather than women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I might say, if I'm talking about people with penises, that doesn't happen very often, but I might say people with penises rather than men. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing that we talked about when we were off the call that I thought was really interesting, something to be aware of, and when you start looking for these things, it's a kind of a good test for how aware you are. If next time you're buying sanitary products, look at the wrapping, look at the packaging, and look at how
Mm-hmm.
heteronormative it is. Because my
Yeah.
daughter sent me a picture of a wrap of a sanitary towel. She was like, "Look at this," and it had the little female gender icon on it. You know, the circle
Yeah.
with the
The Venus symbol.
cross underneath it. That's the Venus symbol. That's it. She was like, "Oh my God." She was like, "What about?" And she gets it. She was like, "What about
Yeah.
menstruating men? And what about trans people? And what about non-binary people? This must be so
Yeah.
awful for them. They shouldn't be allowed to do this."
Yeah.
Like I say, she's
Yeah.
woke. But stuff like that you're not even aware of until someone points it out to you. And as soon as you start
Mm-hmm.
seeing it, it gives you a little bit of insight into
Yeah.
how alienating that world can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So was there anything else you wanted to share before we finish? I'm going to do a little bit of wrapping up in a minute, but what was there anything else you wanted to say? Is there anything we talked about that we haven't covered?
Yes, the book.
The
If I
book!
can plug the book.
You can totally plug the book. Where's my copy?
Let me
It's
just
here
grab my
somewhere.
copy.
Here we go. Oh, I'm falling off the bed.
Yeah.
I hope we're referring to the same book.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. That could have been awkward.
Yeah. So a bunch of trans and non-binary writers have put together this little book. It's called Transverse, We Won't Be Erased. I have 2 poems in here. And you can buy it. There is a website where you can buy it from. It is $6.49, I believe, directly from the website, and then you have to pay like £5 odd postage. Or if you let me know, I have a few copies, and then I can do another bulk order.
I have a signed copy.
Yes, you can have a signed copy. If I do a bulk order, I will sign and personalize your copies. Thank you very much for buying. And the money raised from the book goes to I can never remember the order. Trans Refugee Initiative in Kenya. I believe that's correct. Ash might tell me off if I got that wrong. But yeah, so the money, so the writers don't profit. The editor, Ash, he doesn't profit either. It all goes to this charity. Obviously, apart from what it costs to actually create the book.
Produce the book. Yeah.
So if anybody would like a copy, I can drop the link in the comments, or you can come to me directly and I can do another bulk order.
I will
and
put a
signed up
link in the
copies.
description of the video as well. Like you
Yep,
had me, the book had me at the first page.
yep.
Says, to the person who needed to read this today, you know who you are. You are enough. You are valid. You are loved. And I was like, this is my kind of book. It's a great book. I said to you, I'm reading kind of a couple of poems most nights before I go to sleep. I'm really enjoying
Yeah,
it. I really like it.
yeah.
So it's a really insightful piece of writing. And in
Thank
lots of
you.
different voices, and I really like it. I'm really
Yeah.
enjoying it. So people can support you by getting a copy of this book and support trans people in general. How else?
Yep.
Because we want to make sure, because you've given up your time this evening to be with me
Hmm.
and to tell your story and to share your wisdom. How else can people find you? Where they can find you on Facebook? They can find you on your website.
Yeah. So my website, www.thequeerdoula.co.uk. That's my official website. My page on Facebook is The Queer Doula. You can also friend request me via Nanny Kimbo. On Instagram, I'm also at Nanny Kimbo. And most of my Queer Doula stuff goes on that Instagram as well. Um, if you want me to come and talk on your platform, just drop me a message and let me know. With regards to the book, if you put shows on, cabaret shows, that sort of thing, if you're looking for some spoken words, I have a lot of people who are happy to come and basically read their stuff at your show and maybe even bring some books to sell.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's
And if people want to send you a little something to say, thank you, you're amazing, here, go and buy yourself a nice notebook, a coffee, a Mercedes
yeah.
Benz, can they do that? Do you have a PayPal link or a buy me a coffee link that they can do that through?
Yes, I have a PayPal link. I can't remember what it is right now,
It's all right. I'll
but
post a link for that. Don't worry.
yeah.
I'll do that.
And
So people,
if you
go
want
on, go
to
ahead.
buy me a Mercedes, if you want to buy me a Mercedes, you'll need to hire me a chauffeur as well because I can't drive.
Okay. God, high maintenance much. Thanks for the Merc and all, but I'll be needing a chauffeur too. Fucking hell. So
Or
let me
just
just
buy a
tell
hat for Andy.
Aha. Let me just tell people, recap that, and then let me just tell people what else they can access through Unstoppable Woman, if you don't mind. Is that okay? And I'll tell
Yeah,
people who's
yeah.
going to be my guest next week. So, just to
Hmm.
recap, thequeerdoula.co.uk, on Facebook, The Queer Doula, on Instagram, Nanny Kimbo. Let Kimbo know if you would like a copy of Transverse, and I will pop a link for their PayPal link. Sorry, if you would like to send them something exciting, Mercedes-Benz or otherwise. I have a buy me a coffee link. If you like my content and you would like to support me with a small gesture, I will post that up. You can buy me a coffee, just a one-off, or you can buy me a coffee monthly. Or I am open to Mercedes-Benz and I do drive, so that would save you some money. A couple of other things for you. So registration is open for my Unstoppables bootcamp now. We start on the 21st of October. And it's a 5-week online course with live content from me every week. We focus on things like self-care, negative self-talk, good mental health, filling up your cup, all that kind of stuff. You'll find more
I did the
information
boot
about that on my
camp and I
page.
recommend it.
You loved boot camp, didn't you?
I did, yes.
So we have some amazing people already in the cohort. It is £45 for the 5-week course. If you are interested in bootcamp, you want me to slide into your inbox and send you some information, just stick bootcamp in the comments and I will make sure that you get the details. And I also have a free group. It's linked to my page. It's called Heidi Mavir, the Unstoppable Inspiration Station. And currently in that group, we're doing 100 days of self-care. So if you'd like to join us over there, you'd be more than welcome to join. And next week, I am interviewing as part of my Unstoppable series, Ange Hander. So Ange is a British Asian woman. She is the founder of, oh my God, I always get the words the wrong way around. I'll come back to it. She is a mental health first aider and she does a lot of work in the disability space, and she's particularly hot on intersectionality. She started a petition about 5 years ago to prevent the extradition of a woman and her daughter who were at risk of FGM. and she's an amazing woman. And the organization that she's founded is a networking organization called Inspiring Women Changemakers. And basically it's for people who believe, regardless of their gender, people who believe that that when people come together, they can do incredible things. So there's lots of people who like work in the corporate space who have like a real sense of social responsibility. And there's also people who work in the charitable space who find value in being linked to people who work in the corporate space. It's what I like to describe as heartfelt networking. It's kind of I hate networking, but I love inspiring women change makers. So if you are familiar with Jem Kennedy, who I interviewed a few weeks ago, Jem has launched a petition with some help from some of the people from Inspiring Women Changemakers, which has now gone global. So it's a great lobbying body. So I'll be interviewing Ange next week. We'll be talking how to lobby and campaign, FGM, what asylum really looks like in this country. She's really clued up on that. So it's going to be a great chat. So join me next Sunday night at 7 o'clock for that. And then I'll introduce the next week and the next week. I've got we're booked through till Christmas. I've got some incredible guests. So I just want to say thanks, Kimbo, because I've wanted to do this for ages, and you have been such an amazing friend to me over the past couple of years, and you never fail to amaze me with your resilience and your patience at having me as a friend. So I'm glad we could do this. I'm really glad we could do this.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for having me and just, giving me space to talk all things queer and trans. Because it's not easy to give up your space and let somebody else take over your space. And I really appreciate it. And obviously I appreciate your friendship so much.
Oh, I very love you.
I very love you too.
Right. Crystal and Louise are both saying thank you so much. They've got lots of value from our talk tonight. And I will go and pull this and pop it on YouTube and send it out to my mailing list subscribers so that no one misses out. And I'll speak to you later. Bye. Bye. See you later on. Good night.